Yes, very good evening to one and all present here. I am Bhavdeep Chavra, one of the alumni members. Uh, uh, on behalf of the Alumni Associations and Department of English, I heartily welcome all of you here. Today we are having Mr. Jamil Al-Kaberi, who is going to talk on diaspora-related terms. Uh, Mr. Jamil is a teaching assistant at the English department, Thamar University, Yemen. He obtained his bachelor's from Thamar University and master's in comparative literature from University of Hyderabad. And he is currently pursuing his PhD from Department of English and Comparative Literary Studies, Saurashtra University, Rajkot. His research interests include diaspora literature, post-colonial interactions, and cultural hybridity. Without wasting much of time, we'll begin with today's session. Sir, over to you.
Thank you so much. And let me just share my PPT. I could not share. I don't know where to share the PPT from.
Sir, you may find it with three dots where you find some options.
There's this button called present now on the right side, bottom right. Jamil sir.
Yeah, okay, let me just try.
Yeah.
Okay, I'll just is it now visible?
Yes, you can start the slideshow. Yes, visible.
Yeah, I have started it.
Yes.
Okay, thank you so much for this opportunity. And we will try today in this session to discuss diaspora and some of its related terms. As a new field, some of you might not be familiar with certain terms in diasporas and how it emerged as an independent field of study, and its relationship also to literature and to literary studies. First, we will start with the development of the term, as as it is seen here. It was from the Greek language. It came from the Greek lexicon signifying dispersal. And the Greek used it to refer to colonial settlements and also to colonial expansions. And it was translated from the Jewish language from the Old Testament, and its original meaning was specifically related to the dispersal of the Jewish. But the Greek used it differently, and it's in general a historical term simply signifying the collective experience of the Jewish people. However, the term itself continued to expand beyond the Jewish experience. It expanded to include also other dispersals, such as the Africans and also the Armenians. And it continues even today to incorporate other dispersals and other mobilities of people. It accommodates various forms of mobility in a highly globalized world. And we use it today with more liberal uses, more liberal connotations. And it is a social phenomenon. Mobility of people across borders is very old. Yet, though the term is new, but people were dispersed by natural calamities, by wars, and there were also mass migrations. For example, the migration of early men from Africa to Europe, and also the presumable mobility of Aryans from Central Asia to the Indian subcontinent, and the Gypsies, the Moors in Spain. This is a characteristics of our life, but as a field of study, as a concept, it is new. There were only few notions and references to this term before the 80s. And it was only later on that scholars began to question the fixity of the term and the specific reference to the Jewish experience. They theorized about it, and they formulated certain characteristics to include that enabled them to include also other dispersals. Older notions of this term specifically refer to forced dispersal, but the new notions of diaspora signify any movement across borders. The older notions also signified a return to a homeland, while the new notions are replace that kind of homeland with dense and complex relationships across borders and with homeland and heritage and culture. Uh, then and after the 80s and the 90s, works about diaspora began to appear, and we have names like James Clifford, William Sabran, and Robin Cohen, who started theorizing and writing about this genre, this topic. Their work, as you see here, certain definitions that share some characteristics that diaspora are people living outside their homeland, and that they acknowledge affiliation and loyalty to a homeland, and that they have attachment to multiple locations. However, they also, James Clifford and Robin Cohen, formulated certain criteria to include other dispersals. For example, they said that diaspora, to include a diaspora, they have to be dispersed from a center to a peripheral foreign region, and that they diaspora retain a collective memory of homeland, a collective myth of that homeland, and that they regard their homeland as the ideal and true place, and also that they feel committed to restore and to retain that kind of homeland. But these features or these defining characteristics are no longer relevant to today's diaspora, to today's contemporary diaspora, because and we hence cannot have a reductionist view of diaspora because of those characteristics that we developed in the 90s and 80s. For example, here Duker, in his definition, emphasizes the multiple associations of diaspora. You see here, for example, he says that they have multiple historical associations, either in time and place, past and history. And even V.J. Mishra, in his definition, considers diaspora as non-normative communities. Non-normative communities in the sense that they do not follow a particular norm in their identity construction. They have an nonlinear history, and their also cultural and literary production is non-linear. These definitions give us an idea that diaspora continues to evolve, the definition continues to expand, and we come to identify diaspora as an interdisciplinary field of study. It has established itself as an interdisciplinary field of study in humanities and social sciences, and including literature, art history, cultural anthropology. And this has created a discursive space in the scholarship of diaspora, and enabled students today and scholars to take perspective either from an anthropological, social, cultural, and maybe some of you someday will have a growing interest in any of these fields. We'll just go gloss over this concept, just giving you a background about diaspora. Then here we come to the types of diaspora. There are so many ways in defining and classifying diaspora. Some classify them or categorize them historically. We say, for example, prehistoric or pre-colonial, colonial, and post-modern or post-independent diaspora, or we can classify them according to the experience of the diaspora themselves. You can say, for example, a victim diasporas or according to the movement. I am here just trying to give three samples or three categories of diaspora according to the movement of the people themselves. Dispersal, which was forcibly, and then voluntary, and what comes in between, a kind of historical moment. Victim diasporas usually refers to Jewish, Armenians, Africans, and there are also examples of victim diasporas in our contemporary world. For example, the Syrians, the war in Afghanistan created also victim diasporas in many other countries. What characterizes this category is that they are banished from their original homeland, and it is a result of traumatic events like persecution, like also conquest, historical conquests, and exile. Also, yes, all those historical events that displaced people from their original homelands. Indentured diaspora is a specific historical term that was developed during the British colonial rule of India. It came after the abolition of slavery, and it came as, yeah, they came up with this idea of indentured labor, where workers have to sign a contract, and they were taken to colonies to work in plantations and also railway projects. And it was a bondage labor. It was a system that developed during that colonial period. And Britain transported more than 2 million Indians to 19 colonies in Fiji and Kenya and South Africa and Malaysia and Trinidad and many other colonies of Britain. These people moved sometimes alone, and they also sometimes moved with their families. They were promised to receive wages and also to return home once their contract is over. However, this seldom happened. They then some of them returned home and some could not, and they started to integrate with the new community. And we now study them as Indian diaspora. We study their literature as diaspora. Voluntary diaspora is a characteristic of globalization. It represents mostly our contemporary diasporas, and most of them are engineers, intellectuals, highly skilled people, and they are mostly in metropolitan centers of colonial powers. Their movement is voluntary, and that is the simple thing about them. And we will study them also in our their literature and their cultural production. The importance of diaspora as an analytical category, we study diaspora. In diaspora, we study human experience, either from a historical perspective, from a cultural perspective, from an ethnic perspective. We study identity construction and how these people construct a relationship with their homeland and build relationships also with the new countries they have adopted. In diaspora studies, we also study a particular kind of consciousness and cultural production foregrounded in ethnographic text, in also theoretical works, in cultural studies, and also literature, music, and the art in general. As a practical concept, it's really of very much interest to nation states. And before we talk about the significance of diaspora for nation states, we have first to say something about the definition of a nation state and also diaspora. Nation state as a concept came in the 20th century and simply refers to a group of people in living in a specific border and sharing culture and heritage. And diaspora, by living outside this boundary, questioned the concept of nation state. They were considered as a threat at the beginning of creating borders and also at the rise of nationalism. Diaspora were not taken easily. They were nation states were really skeptical of their presence outside their borders, and hence there was a complex relationship between diaspora and its homeland. But today the situation has changed markedly. Diasporas nation states are taking hold of their diasporas. They are taking hold of them because they consider them as a resource for financial aid, as a resource for also development, because as a resource of ideas or as a resource of technology, and they sometimes act as active players in diplomacy, in soft power for cultural and also political mobilizations. For example, the most significant part of diaspora is that they transfer huge funds to their homelands in these days, and they participate in funding projects, in funding initiatives, and they are also involved sometimes in proposing social and political reforms. Diasporas today really act as hinged between different spaces and geographical scales. Their social and cultural relationships, their social and cultural and political networks that they establish belong to each of the homeland and also the country that they have adopted. India has really, from the acknowledge the presence and significance of its diaspora, and this is represented by a very significant event in the study of diaspora, which is Pravasi Bharatiya Divas, an annual conference that is held in January every year, and it is an event that is really organized to honor Indian diaspora and their contribution to their homeland. It's not out of interest in the culture or in the ethnic aspect of this, but they recognized also their contribution in terms of economy, in terms of ideas, in terms of technology. And this event is really organized at a high level, sometimes ministerial level, and even presidential level. And India has come up with certain strategies to accommodate its diasporas, and Indian constitution doesn't allow double citizenship. So they gave certain labels like non-residents Indians and people of Indian origin, and this allowed diaspora to have access to their homeland and to participate in the cultural and also interactions that have been in the country in terms of development, in terms of culture. It was an attempt to reconnect them to their countries. Now, Indian diaspora has moved from the margin to the center. They are no longer seen as indentured laborers, but now they occupy a center stage. And this is manifested by intellectuals who are in the American, British, and Canadian universities. And there are also governors. There are also prominent figures in politics, in science, in many Western countries. The significance is also manifested in the growing number of centers that are devoted to the study of diaspora. There are so many centers. Here in India, we have in Gujarat one center in the Central University of Gujarat, centers in Delhi, and also centers in University of Hyderabad. This recent interest in diaspora has also is of benefit for both homeland and also the diaspora community. Wait. Okay. Is there any comment? Hello, guys. Am I still there? Are
Yes,
you
sir.
still?
Yes, sir. You are audible. And
Yeah, they
I,
BBT, is it there?
and if there is a comment or observation, we will we will interrupt in between.
Okay, the presentation is still visible?
Yes, yes, very much.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah, now we are here at preeminent theories of diaspora. There are so many theorists, and the interesting that most of them are still alive, and because the field of diaspora is still young, and it's not surprising to find that they are all still alive. The first one is William Safran, as he contributed significantly to the study of diaspora, and he is an American professor, and his study also is related to cultural pluralism, to national identities, and also to ethnic identities. He was, along with James Crawford and also Robin Cohen, he was among the first to define diaspora, to set criteria to expand the definition of diaspora. James Crawford also is credited for starting the first journal devoted to the study of diaspora, and some consider this journal as the starting point for institutionalizing diaspora as a field of study. And then we come to Paul Gilroy. Paul Gilroy was a British scholar and mostly known for his study of the African cultural production. And in this book, he argued that slavery and slave trade created a hybrid culture that transcended also national boundaries. And Robin Cohen also is known for this book, Global Diasporas, in which he gave accounts of different diasporas, pre-modern, modern, and also colonial, pre-colonial. He gave several, he gave us an account of different diasporas in his book. And it's the starting point for a student or for a scholar of diaspora. Then Stuart Hall is a cultural theorist and mostly known for his concept of cultural identity, in which he argues that culture or cultural identity is always transformed. It always in a change, and it goes beyond national boundaries, beyond time and space. And the Homi Bhabha is also one of the prominent figures in diaspora. He is also studied in post-colonial theory, but we here group him in diaspora because of his contribution with the concept of third space and also hybridity. There is also a long list of critics of theories in diaspora, but we may not have time to discuss them all. We will discuss them when we discuss the terms of diaspora. In the previous slides, we just try to familiarize ourselves how the concept evolved and how it gone beyond the Jewish prototype. And we here come to diaspora writing, diaspora literature. And automatically, when we say diaspora literature, it is simply the literature produced by people who are writing from outside their homelands. However, as a concept, it is new. As a process, it's very old. But unfortunately, we do not have literary productions of pre-colonial diasporas. There might be ancient diasporas, but we do not have any literary productions of them. The term diaspora literature is therefore limited only to authors writing from Western metropolitan centers. And it's a new genre. It's a new genre of writing that appeared in the second half of the 20th century, and it has its own characteristics. And we should not confuse it with the other terms or with the other kinds of writing like Anglophone or Indian English writing, because these are different. There are certain characteristics for diaspora, and we will discuss them one by one. But Even some works of diaspora are studied today under other course names, for example, transnational literatures or emerging literatures. However, writing, as I said, for diaspora is different from Anglophone writing or from Indian English writing, because diaspora writers are tied to a particular place and the experience of migrancy itself. They write to understand themselves, they write to form their identities. And earlier writings of diaspora were read within specific circles of immigrant communities. They were read as guides to new immigrants to teach them how to handle cultural encounters and also how to what to expect in the new culture. It was like do's and don'ts. These were the early writings of diaspora writing. It was therefore a genre of limited readership. It was sometimes considered also as ethnic writing, representative of a particular culture, representative of a certain ethnicity or a particular immigrant community. But today, diaspora has really evolved beyond these boundaries and it is received internationally. Some texts of diaspora literature are also studied. They have become part of curriculum in colleges and universities. And this institutional recognition has really canonized diaspora literature. It has also expanded its readership and it's no longer limited to the communities of diaspora. Now, for example, we have writers like Mohsen Hamid, like Salman Rushdie, Juno Diaz, and also Jamba Lahiri, Chimamanda Adichie. These authors are studied and read all over the world. And most importantly, we have authors who won a Nobel Prize like F.C. Naipaul, and also authors who novels and short stories and collections which won Man Booker Prize and also Pulitzer Prize. And these prizes and literary recognition really solidifies this kind of genre in literature. What really demarcates diaspora writing from other forms of writing, either Anglophone or Indian English writing, is home consciousness. Home consciousness in the sense that home always haunts diaspora writers. The presence of home, imagined or real in their writing, is what makes them different. Their writing involves really the experience of migrancy. It is associated to abroadedness and also a concept of identity, cultural identity, and the crisis that happens in their identification, cultural or also personal. Today, diaspora literature also positions homeland as a primary site of engagement. They write literature and their homeland remains in the background. Their literary traditions also is invoked in their writing, and their writing becomes fused with images, ideas, and also symbols from their homeland. There is also something peculiar about diaspora writing, which is an original sense of trauma in diaspora writing. And therefore, writing becomes for them an act, a performative act to retell their stories and also to cure themselves from the trauma. There are traces of trauma in their writing, and telling stories means creating spaces for identification, creating specific spaces for constructing their identities. Also, some theorists or some critics place diaspora writing under post-colonial theory. But in post-colonial theory, we said the most important idea in post-colonial theory that authors appropriate the colonizer's language, and that they respond to a canon, and that they speak back to the canon. But in diaspora writing, some earlier writers, for example, first generation writers, attempted to do that. But today, for second generation, also third generation diasporas, the situation is slightly different. They do not write to a former colonizer. They have become part of the canon itself. They write the language that we use in their writing is no longer foreign for them, because they are born in that country, and they write they automatically inherited the language and the culture of the country they adopted. This is still contested, and we cannot really affirm that diaspora writing is a writing back to the colonizer. Diaspora writing is also considered to destabilize the hegemony of the Western canon, because of hybridity in diaspora writing. We identify hybridity in the mixed expression and the combination of Western and non-Western forms, languages, and also literary forms. And in general, border crossing leads to fusion of ideas, images, and ways of thinking. And even writing itself becomes hybrid, including elements of different literary traditions, different cultural forms. This fusion also creates a space, which Homi Bhabha says it is a third space. This space is considered as a space of unlimited potential for artistic and creative production. Diaspora writing is also characterized as semi-realistic, semi-autobiographical, because they narrate and they also recount their personal experiences, their family's experiences, and sometimes they narrate the experience of the whole community. They narrate how they moved, how they migrated from one place to another, how they existed in different locations in different spaces. Diaspora writing is Bildungsroman in the sense that it traces the development of the central character, mostly moving across borders, moving from one culture to another. And this central character, the genre of coming of age style, finds himself born in a country, trying to navigate the different cultural elements that he has, trying to understand who he is in this amalgamation of cultural forms, trying to also to find roots, to construct a particular identity, either hybrid or hyphenated. Diaspora literature is also postmodern in the sense that it is fragmented. It is not fixed in time and place. It is full of intertextuality, because diaspora writers inherited different elements of from their heritage, from their culture, and also from the culture they adopted. And it becomes difficult for you to read a post-colonial diaspora text unless you translate or you understand more than one culture, because they fuse different forms, different expressions, and different symbols and images from their home culture, and also from the new culture that is their new adopted home, either United States or Britain or Canada or any other country. It is historiographical because diaspora, in their attempt to make themselves heard, they try to narrate an alternative history. They try to situate themselves to build history for their existence in these new colonies, on these new adopted homes. It is therefore considered as a historiographical text, as we see in Midnight's Children. It's obsessed with the history of homeland, and it's not really about homeland. It's about situating themselves in a linear or non-linear particular history. And diaspora writing sometimes is considered as self-reflective, and self-reflective as a meta-technique is really, when you read a diaspora text, you find that certain references to its form, it is a novel. every time the author reminds you that the text that you are reading is a novel or is a short story. Why is this? This is because earlier critics of diaspora literature were considered it as memoir writing, historiographic writing, because it was loosely autobiographical, and it did not receive that kind of appreciation from early critics, particularly from the Western critics. But the situation has changed now, and it has this technique, this strategy, meta narrative has remained part of diaspora literature, and it's not something wrong. It is part of its evolution as a specific genre. Now we come to the terms of diaspora, and there are definitely so many terms of diaspora, and most of them are appropriated from colonial studies, for example, and not only from colonial studies, from different fields. Assimilation, for example, is studied in sociology. Transnationalism or cosmopolitanism is also studied in political sciences. Hybridity and identity is also studied in sociology and cultural studies. But we will try to limit and take only 2 or 3 terms for today's session, and we may have another session for discussing certain literary text and how we use hybridity and also theories to apply on literary text of diaspora. Today we will talk just about homeland and hybridity in diaspora literature. For us settled people, home and homeland might be something that is easy to understand, but for diasporas it's really a complex issue. It's really a part of their existence. It's part of their efforts to define themselves, to take a grip on their existence and their association between countries. And we cannot really understand home for diasporas unless we discuss imagined communities. I said before that the definition of a nation was simply a country or a group of people living within a given historical, within a given boundary, and sharing culture and heritage. But this definition also negates diaspora. And Benedict Anderson came with the concept imagined communities, and this concept also helped diaspora to claim a homeland, to claim membership to a homeland, even if it's imaginary, even if it's just imagined. This concept, if we understand it, we will find that, according to Benedict Anderson, a nation is imagined because its members, even in the smallest state, cannot know or hear or even meet their fellow members, but there is a union that is in their minds that unites them. This is really very specific to diaspora. What unites them, what connects them with their homeland, is just an imagined community, an imagined homeland that they keep in their mind and cherish throughout their existence in the new countries. And we come to the second concept, imaginary homelands, from Rushdie. It's not a concept, it's the title of a collection of essays by Rushdie that came after the publication of Midnight Children. And it is in this collection of short stories, Rushdie tries to give us an explanation about the role of memory in diaspora writing and how memory constructs a past, how the diaspora writer is like an anthropologist trying to reconstruct a past from fragments of memory. It is through this essay, his essay, Imaginary Homelands, that we understand that remembering for diaspora becomes an element for constructing identities, and home becomes a mystic place of desire for diasporas. Home is a frozen place, and it's frozen in time and can only be constructed by virtue of diasporic memory. he gave us also examples about his ancestral home in Mumbai and how he imagined it. And when he visited Mumbai, he finds it completely different, and it becomes home for diaspora. It becomes fictive. It becomes frozen in time. It becomes also a mystic place that is not real at all. In diaspora literature, really, memory provides ample material for picturing home. It enables diaspora writers to construct imaginary homelands, as in the case of Midnight Children. It most importantly influences the formation of identity by thrusting a feeling of belonging, and remembering itself connects diasporas with their past, with their heritage, and hence it creates a collective sense of identity. It also engenders a sense of responsibility towards homeland, towards culture, and also heritage. It equips diasporas with a sense of ethnic difference. And once you find yourself different, it means you will not, the diaspora individual will not assimilate, the diaspora individual will construct either a hybrid identity or a hyphenated identity. Also, the type of remembering, the intensity of remembering is not unified. It is different. For example, for first generation immigrant, home becomes a nostalgic memory. Homes becomes the conception of home becomes romantic, and there are usually vivid images of home as a place, as a heaven, home as an ideal place, a true place of belonging. But for second and third generation immigrants, home is where you feel comfortable. Home is anti-nostalgic. Home is fluid, it's not fixed in time and place. And there are either multiple homes or no homes at all. This is for the new generations of diaspora. And we can see here also in the quote taken from V.G. Mishra's book, where he also gives us an idea about the older generation of diaspora and how they identify themselves through cultural texts, through iconic images, and also the new diasporas and how they identify themselves through different means. Now, the internet constitutes the self. The internet really provides different materials for the diaspora to identify with their homeland. And this is a new, will change also the conception of diaspora as a whole, and makes it even an interesting topic for research in diaspora. The second most important topic is in diaspora is hybridity. It's a term of fixed and dark history. It was a biological term designating a cross between two species, and it earlier evoked it evoked racial connotations. Hybrids were considered as infertile, debased, and they were sometimes accused of moral decadence. And however, it was just part of the pro-slavery period in the 19th century. The situation has changed a lot, and it now in the 20th century, hybridity gained currency in many fields. It became also a buzzword in both the cultural studies. It was in the 20th century that hybridity transcended the racial and the biological connotations, and it entered new areas such as linguistics, literature, and cultural studies. It started with the work of Mikhail Bakhtin, Discourse in the Novel, where he argued that there exist multiple voices in a novel, which he terms as polyphony or the concept of dialogism. Yes, and the term also in the 20th century featured prominently in post-colonial theory, describing the different mixtures that resulted from colonial contact And when we talk about hybridity in post-colonial studies, we automatically revert to Homi Bhabha, who is considered uh, the exponent of this theory. And his book, The Location of Culture, is considered the Bible of hybridity. He used this term to encounter the existing polarities, the age-old binarisms that existed between the East and the West, the black and the white, the master and the slave, the self and the other. For him, also in his book, The Location of Culture, Bhabha explains that national culture is not a static entity. Culture is in a state of flux. It cannot be fixed in time and place. Culture for him is something that is always in motion, something that is characterized by connectedness, by mixedness. And based on these notions, he proposed hybridity of culture. For him, culture means the rejection of a single identity for multiple and also multiple cultural identifications, for multiple cultural locations. And today, hybridity in post-colonial theory has positioned itself as an alternative discourse that subverts the very idea of dominant culture and also the unique canon, and it also invites a re-examination of the relationships and power structures that exist between languages and cultures. In diaspora literature, from the level of narrative, hybridity signals an appropriation of languages, of cultures, of canon, and of a form of expression. It is a characteristic of diaspora. And diaspora, according to Homi Bhabha, occupy a third space. And it is this third space that helps them to navigate their culture of their native culture and also the culture of the country they adopted. And the critical power of hybridity is in its ability to question what appears normal and complete. Hybridity is said to resist the assumptions of cultural purity, which is mainly in service of hegemony. It is really a sense of gives a sense of multiplicity in today's world. And there are also anti-hybridity backlash. Is not just a flowery thing about hybridity, as we see here, as a raceless chaos, as that it's celebrating the composite, the heterogeneous, and the eclectic. However, hybridity remains very essential for diaspora studies because it is for diaspora like what construction is for discourse. Hybridity in diaspora really creates this kind of third space in which uh, national identities and also transnational identities, they meet and contest and they produce something new that cannot be fixed in time. It is now, it has been transformed from a biological, a racial term, and it has become now a common sense term in literature and in culture, and it is deployed as an important concept to advance our understanding of transnational, to advance, to develop our perspective about this group of people, what we call diaspora, and it is a site of transformation for them to create, as we say, it is a potential for creating unlimited artistic forms and creative works. Here we come to the end of today's session, and we will have 10 minutes for discussion because there are still also other concepts, but I don't think we will be able to cover them all. We'll stop here for some notions and for uh, reflecting back about what we have presented, and I hope you can ask some questions.
Yes, participants, the session is open for questions. If you have any questions, please either you put it in chat box or unmute yourself and present your question. I think there were two hands raised. There was one Joshi, I think Devanshi Joshi. Devanshi, do you have any question?
Sir, I have raised it by mistake. I really don't have any question.
Okay, no problem.
Yes.
And there was one more by Archita Patia. Okay, there is a question in a chat box. Uh, can we find chromatic theme in every diasporic writing?
No, no, it's really not traumatic for all diasporas. The earlier, or what we term as first generation diasporas, their experience is really traumatic. But for second and third generation diasporas, the situation is completely different. They feel that they exist in multiple locations. For example, homeland for them is not fixed. They feel that they are international, or what we call transnational cosmopolitan citizens of the world. And they celebrate both cultures. They are positioned in a situation that is beneficial for them. They take elements from their cultural heritage, and they are also knowledgeable of the new culture. So it's not traumatic at all for all of them. But there is usually an element of loss. There is an element of original trauma, and storytelling becomes for them as cure. They try to tell others how they feel. They try to explain to them that we exist in this world. Yes, please. I hope I answered your question.
Yeah, thank you, sir. There is one more question by Archita. She is asking, is diasporic writing highly autobiographical in nature?
Really, most of diaspora literature is loosely autobiographical. I mean, the earlier writings are about diaspora themselves. They just tell their personal experience of moving from their homelands, and it was criticized. This style was criticized by so many people, but now new diaspora writers try to go beyond this line. They try to focus more on aesthetics, not just focusing on their own or their diasporic community. They go beyond these divisions and try to create an international or what we call transnational literature.
Okay, thank you. Uh, I don't see any other questions here. All right, Parth, can you
Yes.
please let us know? Should we?
All right. If there are no questions, I think we can call it a day. Uh, I don't know if Jamil sir wants to add up something. Sir, something that you have missed out or something that you would like to add.
Yeah, what I tried to give in this session is just background about diaspora, because it may be new for some, because it's not studied as a separate field of study. We tried to give how the term evolved and how it's also interlinked with other fields in cultural studies, in anthropology, but it has established itself as a genre in writing. And as we talked with Mukherjee sir, he said that we have to give examples, and maybe in another session we will study certain novels and talk about Jamba Lahiri and also Bharati Mukherjee and
True.
Salman Rushdie, just to solidify to theory about diaspora and how
True.
they create diasporic identities, hybrid or also hyphenated identities.
True. In fact, that I believe would be, a little more interesting session for the graduates and postgraduate level students, because when they come across creative works wherein they can apply these terms or these theories, they would find it more interesting, isn't it?
Yeah, there is really a growing interest in diaspora literature, and see, if you go through the topics of diaspora research in our department, you will find at least three or four studying diaspora,
Yes,
taking authors from because
correct,
India has the largest diaspora in the world, more than 35 million.
true.
So it is true that you will find a number of authors, a
There
list
is
of.
Kiran Desai's Inheritance of Loss, for instance.
Yes, yes. We may have it as a specific example
and
of diaspora.
and in the Indian context, it becomes even more slightly complex because rather than one nationality, we have state identities again.
Yeah, because India is multicultural country, and you
Yes,
say there are studies about Indian diaspora, but they find them multilingual, multi-religious, and also
true.
multicultural. But there is something imagined community that connects them. The idea of Indianness,
Yes,
the
true.
imagined community that we presented here, just a slight thing about imagined community, is very essential for identification of diaspora. And India is a huge and massive country. This term served diaspora and also served nation states in
True.
democratic nation states. We fight for a nation state because of this imagined community.
Yes, yes. Thank you so much, Jamil sir. Uh,
Thank
uh, it was indeed. I mean, I personally got to learn so many new terms, so many things, and thank you for having consented for a session. So quickly at a very short notice.
Thank you so much, and probably.
Yes, and we hope to see you again for another session based on creative works.
Yeah, definitely. As Mukherjee sir suggested, we will have also another session specifically to Indian diaspora literary works. We may discuss 4 or 5 works and apply the models that we studied: victim diaspora, first generation, memory, how they interact with the homeland. For example, Bharati Mukherjee is different from Salman Rushdie. That
Yes.
one is, for example, obsessed with the idea of imagined home, and Bharati Mukherjee is really transnational, thinking of home in multi locations. We will talk about this next time and wish you all the best.
Just a minute, Bhavdeep bhai, you can take this last question that has
Yes,
just popped in to the chat box,
yes.
and then you
Sir,
can thank the speaker.
sure. Yeah, sir, there is one last question that has come up by Rini. She is asking about how can we differentiate Anglophone writers and diaspora writers?
Yes, definitely. This is an interesting question. And Uh, diaspora writers, as we said, they are because of their home consciousness, because of their original trauma that is characterized in their work. But Anglophone writing, for example, here, English Indian writing, somebody can write here in India, but he may not have that kind of migrancy, that kind of experience of moving across borders. So his themes will be limited. He will be limited also in his approach to a culture, has only one perspective. But diaspora writing, for example, if a diaspora writer approaches a sensitive issue in a homeland, you will have a different perspective. But someone situated in a homeland will be limited. So Anglophone writing, anybody can write in English today, but it will not be considered as diaspora.
Thank you, sir. I think that yes, she gets answer. She's satisfied. Thank you. Uh, Without taking much of time, I would like to add one or two things. As I am in academics, and I have learned quite a few things today about diaspora, because that was a part which even I haven't touched. Uh, Thing is, I have also heard about that there are some universities which are planning to establish exclusive diaspora departments. Now, the
Yes,
people
yes.
who are planning for university, postgraduate, or academics, they should take this into their considerations because this
Yes,
will really help
let
them.
me just say something about this. There is a center in Central University of Gujarat, which is exclusively for the study of diaspora, but it's multidisciplinary, not focusing
Yes,
on literature only. They study
yes.
it from as a social category. And there is also University of Hyderabad, which is called Center for Indian Diaspora. There is also a forum in Delhi, and also maybe three in Delhi, three centers, which are all about diaspora.
So
Maybe
basically, this center is developing, growing in a very
very,
rapid
very
way.
fast. These centers were established in the last 10 years, more than 10 centers in India.
Okay, okay. Well, thank you, sir. Thank you very much for a wonderful session. On behalf of Alumni Association and all the participants, I thank you all. A special thanks to the speaker. That's it for today. Thank you.
All the best.